The wind pushed across the gravel lot behind Chalice Lanes, carrying the smell of dust and cold asphalt as the last daylight thinned out behind the Idaho hills. A yellow pickup rolled in slowly, its headlights sweeping across the quiet field before the engine cut off. The driver stepped out for only a moment, a shape moving in the dimness, barely noticed by the few people still inside the bowling alley. At nearly the same time, 9-year-old Stephanie Crane walked toward the exit, her league games finished, her sweatshirt sleeves pushed up, her hair loose and wind-tangled. She pushed open the glass door and stepped into the fading evening, unaware that these were the last seconds anyone would see her with certainty. The afternoon had started ordinarily. Stephanie's mother had dropped her off around 4, handed her $1 for a snack, and chatted briefly before heading home. Inside, the lanes echoed with rolling balls, laughter, and the clatter of pins. Stephanie bowled her games with friends, collected her belongings, and lingered near the snack counter. By 4:45, the league had wrapped up, and several adults watched children spill outside toward waiting cars or the road home. One of the other mothers offered Stephanie a ride. The girl shook her head and said she needed to walk to the high school soccer field across the highway to get her backpack. It was the sort of small errand 9-year-olds in a rural town ran without much concern. She started down the short slope toward Highway 93, a route she'd taken many times. A couple of people saw her heading that direction, her pace easy, nothing unusual in her stride. Around 6 o'clock came the last reliable sighting, Stephanie walking along the edge of the road toward the field. The sky had darkened to a dusty violet, and the traffic was light. A slight chill pushed across the valley. She was alone on a familiar stretch of pavement, steps away from the field where she said she'd left her backpack. After that moment, she was gone. Back at home, the minutes passed too slowly. Her mother expected to hear the door open, expected the sound of shoes on the carpet or the fridge opening. But as daylight faded, the house stayed quiet. She called friends first, then checked the bowling alley, then walked the small loop she knew Stephanie should have taken. When none of that brought her any closer to an answer, she went straight to the Custer County Sheriff's Office. It was 8:16 p.m. Deputies responded immediately. By 9 o'clock, searchers were combing through fields, roadsides, ditches, and the edges of the high school grounds. Flashlights swept through sagebrush and chain-link fences. Volunteers shouted her name into the cold air. The search stretched past midnight, but no one found so much as a footprint. At sunrise, the effort grew. Around 300 people joined the search: neighbors, firefighters, teachers, ranchers, and officers from surrounding counties. 2 small planes flew low over canyons and open grassland. Tracking dogs followed faint trails that led nowhere definitive. The Salmon River was checked along both banks. Crews searched abandoned sheds, culverts, and the outskirts of the mining areas. The ground they covered was enormous, and still nothing surfaced. No clothing, no tracks, no sign she ever made it to the soccer field. By the 3rd day, investigators leaned toward a stranger abduction. There was no history of Stephanie running away, and nothing about her actions that afternoon suggested she intended to go anywhere but home. She was described as cautious, shy around unfamiliar people, and uneasy in the dark. The idea that she would have veered off willingly didn't match anything her family or friends knew. Witness accounts began to narrow the picture. Several people remembered seeing a small yellow pickup with red pinstripes near the high school around the time Stephanie disappeared. It wasn't a familiar vehicle in town. Despite a wide search and inquiries across the region, the truck was never identified. Investigators were left with an unsettling possibility that someone passing through had taken her in a brief, unobserved moment. Years later, one man's name rose again and again: Keith Hescock. He had been in the area in 1993 and owned a vehicle similar to the one witnesses described. His background in other states raised concerns, even though his only Idaho conviction at the time involved poaching. In 2002, he committed a violent kidnapping hours away in Idaho Falls. After a chase with deputies, he took his own life. His connection to Stephanie remained circumstantial, but law enforcement scrutinized him intensely. They searched his property, interviewed those who knew him, and compared timelines. Ultimately, there was no physical evidence linking him to the case. Without a crime scene, the investigation became a slow grind. Every possible lead had to be weighed, mapped, and checked, and many ended without answers. Over the next decades, tips came from former residents, travelers passing through Idaho in the early 90s, hunters who found bones in remote areas, and people who thought they recognized Stephanie's face in old photos. Each tip prompted another round of interviews or searches. None produced a breakthrough. Her family endured the years with a grief that never resolved. Her mother died 4 years after Stephanie vanished. Her father died in 2012. Both left the world without learning what happened to their daughter. Stephanie's sisters grew into adulthood with memories defined as much by her absence as by the few years they shared with her. For them, every anniversary, every news update, and every renewed search reopened the wound. Chalice changed in small ways. Businesses came and went. New families moved in. But the places tied to Stephanie's last steps remained recognizable. The bowling alley with its dim neon glow, the slope leading to Highway 93, the soccer field she never reached. Locals who were there in 1993 can still picture her walking across the asphalt, her sweatshirt slightly oversized, her hair catching in the wind. Investigators never closed the file. Cold case detectives revisited evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and worked with national organizations specializing in long-term disappearances. In the 2020s, new searches targeted remote terrain that earlier crews hadn't been able to access easily. Specially trained dogs, ground-penetrating equipment, and expert search teams combed ridgelines, creek beds, and mine shafts. Each search ended the same way, with no trace of Stephanie. More than 30 years later, her case remains open. The people who knew her say they still hope for clarity, whether through a tip, a confession, or a discovery in a place no one has thought to look. Investigators say the passage of time does not erase the truth. It only means someone, somewhere, still holds a memory that could matter. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.